I mentioned that I started as a horticulturalist. My first career was landscape architecture. Day one, Garrett Ekbo, the great American, Norwegian landscape architect, said 2 lessons you have to learn in this career. Number 1 is you don't build a garden before you watch where people walk. Number 2 is you don't build structures on weak foundations. If we're going to improve STEM education, we have to figure out what are the strengths on which we can build it. Too many of the documents are infatuated with reinvention. Reinvention is a cheap policymaker's solution to the hard problems of improvement. It's so much easier to say reinvent than it is to actually engage in what businesses do for the most part, which is process innovation, not just product innovation. Right? We have to get better and build on strengths. Science, pretty much at the top. So how does Maryland actually do? For those of you who don't usually look at education data, there's only one real reliable source. It's the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And green here is good. Red is bad, right? Yellow is average. And when it comes to white students, now I know this is hard to read, Maryland, Texas, and Massachusetts are at the very top of the country. How much stronger are they than other states? 2 to 3 years ahead of California by the 8th grade. More than a half a standard deviation difference, which is massive. A lot of good stuff is going on in this state. For African American students, Maryland outperforms Massachusetts and is only about 6 or 7 months behind Texas. The good thing about Texas being at the top is every state believes they can do better. So we perform a national service. Hispanic students, Maryland is also ahead of Massachusetts. The popular wisdom is that Massachusetts is the top in everything. Maryland, when you break out the demography, does better. Right? The one place where Maryland is having less stellar results is low-income children. And I think everyone in the state is working on that. And as I'll show you in a minute, Maryland has made more progress on that than any other state in the country, right? Looking at NAEP. So I picked a few states here, and this is a complex graph. This is the growth from 2003 to 2007 on NAEP scores, and 10 points is roughly a full year of learning. It's a quarter of a standard deviation, right? Roughly a full year of learning at the 8th grade. Maryland and Texas have added a full year of learning by the 8th grade. Neither Maryland nor Texas is particularly well aligned with NAEP. Massachusetts is a direct copy of NAEP's framework. So this is a real accomplishment. Connecticut, which used to be at the top of the country, has shown no growth in 4 years, actually declining growth on other indicators, as you'd see. So it's possible to really screw up without strong state leadership. No state has more to build on than Maryland in reaching the next set of math and science goals. Didn't think I'd say that, Nancy, did you? African American students, Maryland and Texas have the highest gains in the country, about a full year of learning. Connecticut, Michigan, basically flat. Hispanics, growing population of Hispanics all throughout the country. Maryland, a full year of additional learning for Hispanics, near the top of the country. Connecticut has lost almost a year. Michigan has lost almost a year in the last 4 years. Free and reduced lunch, Maryland, almost a year and a half gain for low-income students over the last 4 years. That is to be celebrated. And every teacher in Maryland should know what they should be proud of. And they should also know what the next well-chosen problems are that they need to work on to realize the full potential of the children in their care. So I have interviewed in the last 6 months 1,000 teachers, some with Andres Alonso, some in Baltimore, Houston, LA, and New York. And I asked teachers, what are you proud of? And teachers generally like their jobs, and they're proud of things that happen in their own classrooms. Virtually no teachers are proud or believe they're making any difference on the goals that we talk about in our national addresses. Virtually no teachers feel they're closing achievement gaps. When we send messages to our teachers that they don't believe they're succeeding at, it has a corrosive effect on their spirits. Here's data from Texas. In 1996, we started requiring that every student take Algebra 1 and take a New York State-like Regents exam, right, to show they actually mastered the content. The first year, it was a disaster. 10% of African-American students, 12% of Hispanic students, 38% of white students could pass the state algebra test. Thank God for the business community that gave the legislature the courage to set low standards and to build up from them. It was not easy to do, although the business community prefers that I frame it in another way, right? But that's what they actually did. Within 5 years, African American and Hispanic students were doing better than white students did at the beginning of testing. Now the gap is about 3 years. Why? We monitored hundreds of classrooms over these years, and it turns out that by 2002, we were teaching our black and Hispanic students exactly what we used to teach our white students. Very few students learn about quadratic functions on the streets. Right? This is stuff we have to teach students. Now, Fred Winter, my high school buddy, is here, and in our neighborhood, you did learn about quadratic functions on the streets. But there are very few places where that was the case. Right. So I bet in Maryland this is also true. When you look over time, achievement gaps are closing. Let's get it down to 2 years, 1 year, and then 0. But let's set goals when we talk as leaders that our teachers can actually, with effort, achieve. Urban districts. So the framing for this. 15 years ago, only about a half of American high school graduates took Algebra 1. What did the other students take? Well, I think many of you know. There were 3 courses they took if they were not on the college track. They took something called consumer math, which was a cruel joke because the only thing you knew if they were in consumer math is they would never have any money to spend. Then one of my favorites was career math, and no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't figure out which careers they were talking about. And then, of course, the most common was this thing called general math, which I think Jerry Dancis, my friends in the math department, call behind their backs, our friends the numbers. Today, 18 states, including Texas and Arkansas, require students to take 4 years of math and science to graduate, a year past Algebra 2. This is most urban districts. I work with 24 of them and their superintendents. Almost all the large urban districts in the US are requiring math and science every single year. This is a dramatic social transformation. Students are taking courses that were once the province of a privileged few, and we have myriad teachers who are a few minutes ahead of their students. We need to build, and this is a major role for universities and nonprofits, respectful support systems for teachers who are teaching everyone courses that few people used to take. This requires a completely different way of thinking about teaching and about students. Last night at a smaller gathering, I mentioned the study we've done of 9th grade students in large urban districts, including Baltimore. It turns out that half the students in Algebra 1 do not even know the names of the courses they're going to be taking as juniors and seniors. We're not teaching the same kids. We're finally doing what we believe in teaching all kids content that's worthy of the discipline and worthy of children. This is going to require massive enhancements in capacity. And the universities have to step up and think about this work as structural engineers, not as 400 people doing projects with 30 teachers.